College football expansion continues to expand, even in the most ridiculously weird ways. Yes, the news seems to be true. USC football, UCLA football will be joining the Big Ten, if you can even call it that anymore, conference in the near future. Why are we talking about this on a Auburn football specific channel or even just an SEC focused channel? It's a great question. Why are we even doing this late at night? More great questions for yourself, but we'll cover some of that in just a little bit of that. There is some trickle down effect that I think will affect not only Auburn football, SEC football, but I think it will clearly affect all of college football. And that's why it's worthy of us talking about here on this channel on E2C Network Live, where we get together and we talk about what's going on in the world of the Auburn family spectrum. We're always heavy on the sports here, but if it's orange and blue, it is what we do. Thank you for joining us, whether you are watching live or if you're watching the replay. It is a little bit late night broadcast, so I understand, and there was no notice of it whatsoever. So I understand those of you that may be catching it on the replay there. A couple things as we get started. If you are watching live or on the replay, we appreciate you tuning in, and obviously would like for you to do our check-in period right now. Post where you're watching from, city, state, international, with a War Eagle, or however else you would like to greet us here on E2C Network. Now, I will say this, that, usually when we do these type of topics, we get a little bit more new viewers in terms of from obviously other conferences, other fan bases. And that's what we kind of aim for here. We're trying to expand and trying to grow. So we hope to see some of you here. Would love to hear from some of you all about your perspectives, because we are coming from an Auburn fan perspective and a SEC focused perspective. One thing that I do want to remind at the very top of this show, and this is specifically for our people who have been here for a long time, but you can take part in it too if you'd like to. I have at the top of the chat a link to a survey that we announced last night was open. Well, it was open. There were some bugs, though, so we had to restart it. So if you have already completed that that survey last night, yours have been erased, and we would appreciate it if you'd go back in there and do that one more time for us. So check out that link, and anybody can take part in that right now. It helps us shape what we've got going on here on the network. It helps us pick out what content you do and do like. Maybe this little impromptu live stream is the reason for some of the answers that we're already getting on the survey. We'll find out. Anyway, so that's our little bit of a tidbit of news, and we'll talk about some stuff we've got coming up tomorrow a little bit later as we get through this. This topic, though, I didn't believe it when I saw it. I did not. I saw this come through, and I'm like, somebody's, there's a slow news cycle. College sports is officially done with college baseball being done. They need something to talk about. And lo and behold, it looks like there is some legitimacy to this thing. Apparently, it's already been done with votes and stuff like that. UCLA and USC are going to be part of the Big Ten. Wrap your minds around that. Anybody can confirm that that's not true, or if that's still just a rumor. I'd love to hear your impressions of it or just some clarification on that. But as I understand it, this is a legitimate thing. It's been a very busy day here at E2C Network Central. So I've been trying to stay up to date on it as much as I possibly could. Good to see you, Brody. Glad you popped on for just a little bit. Don't really know what to think about this. So I think there's a lot of people that find this confounding in many ways, but especially when you think about geography, when you think about logistics, it really doesn't make a lot of sense outside of what Thomas brings up. Excuse me. What Thomas brings up is the fact that you can think about it in terms of money. TV time slot makes sense. And if you go the super conference route, it makes even more sense. Obviously, I think when you think about what does and doesn't make sense with all of this, that's immediately where you go. Money, TV time, which is money as well, and which is, the two big things that drive a lot of the decisions in college athletics, but especially with college football. So it's understandable, right? I mean, really, when you get down to it, we can sit here and act like this is the most confounding thing that we've ever heard of, that we've ever seen. But when it really gets down to it, it's just about money. Love it or hate it. That's what it really is about. But thanks for checking in, Thomas. We got C Hall checking in and Bo checking in from Auburn. Good to see all of you. Thank you. So share your comments, your questions. Like if you've got like thoughts about this that you're still rummaging through in your heads, this is what this is about. This is just a reaction show. We're not even really just diving deep into all this stuff. This is just processing what is potentially going to take place. What does this mean? And I think that's where we want to go. We can talk a little bit more specifics about the Big Ten and USC and UCLA, but we want to talk more specific what it means for Auburn, what it means for the SEC. Right now, I don't know that it means a whole lot for the SEC other than this is a response to what has already been done by the SEC, right? You've got we had our first round of conference expansion. What was it? Decade plus ago, something like that. Pac-12 added Colorado, Utah. Is that everybody they added? I think so. Big Ten added Rutgers, blanking, Nebraska. I feel like there's some others that I'm missing there. And then obviously Missouri and Texas A&M came over to the SEC. But a lot of that still kind of made sense, geographically. There were only some far reaches out there like West Virginia going to the Big 12 and things like that. Colorado in the Pac-12 is kind of a stretch, but still it all kind of made sense. Now, what's going on? How does this make sense? So what does it mean? I don't think right now, because Auburn, SEC made the first move in bringing Oklahoma and Texas in, right? It was the beginning of the next wave of conference expansion, realignment, whatever you want to call it. And now creating these potential super conferences as people are quoting them or trying to say that that's what they're going to become. So right now, I don't think it means a lot for the SEC and then by trickle-down effect, Auburn football, other than this response. But what this is going to do is open up the floodgates now for other conferences that do not want to become the Big East the Big East type of conference that doesn't exist anymore. That's now the American Conference that doesn't want to lose its legitimacy as the Big 12 is now losing it. So really it comes down to, can the Pac-12 survive? And can the ACC figure out how to survive as well amongst the Big Ten and the SEC, the power conferences, the super conferences, finding a way to make themselves even more powerful? So do I think that this is going to directly right now affect Auburn and SEC? Maybe not, but it's certainly making conversations starting to happen. C Hall, well, we're not really talking about Auburn football, the season right now. We're talking more this high level comment. I appreciate you guys wanting to get some answers on some of these other things, but we're going to focus here on this topic right now. The time difference is my big point. If you want to play late afternoon on the East Coast or the Southeast and Midwest, or a night game and have a viewing audience, it makes sense to move time zones. I think that's a good talking point. I would argue there was a time where Pac-12, Pac-10, however time frame to talk about, was a viewing opportunity. Like it had high engagement. I remember staying up for what was going on in the Pac-12 because USC was so dominant. There were a couple other teams, obviously your Oregon's got in there too, that were relevant to the college football landscape annually. And that's become less and less so. And so now you've got less and less people deciding that they want to take part in this. So how do you make yourself more relevant? Well, you go join a conference that's already very stable, but you go to one that's got a better time zone situation for you, better opportunities for night games and things like that. I mean, obviously, when you're over there in the West Coast, when you play over there, if you're part of the Big 12, you're going to probably have some still day games, what will essentially be day games for you, but night games for them. But if you want a true college football atmosphere, go play over in the Big 10. Go play over in the SEC. Yeah, it's a big, big difference. Congo, big, I'm guessing say 10, will have the best TV marketing from New York to LA marketing. It's all about money. That's obviously we've talked a little bit about it being all about money, but I think that's another great point here is you think about it this way. I mean, it is from the Northeast to LA. Those two big markets are now cornered. I think, if I might, I'm aware I'm an Auburn fan. I'm aware I'm an SEC football fan by proxy. So I'm a little biased to that. Just because you have those two big TV markets doesn't mean that you're going to get a bigger piece of the pie, because if you can't produce the championship level teams the way the SEC is doing, it's not going to really matter what market you have. They're still going to watch and get more excited about the teams that are more dominant. But that's a great, at least, strategy to go off with right now. Take over the New York to LA marketing. You span across the United States. The question is, will the SEC respond? Is the phrase in kind? Will they respond by trying to expand similarly, or will they continue to only expand their current contiguous reach? What do I mean by that? Will they continue to add, maybe, let's talk about some speculation here, and you guys throw out if you have any opinions. A West Virginia, North Carolina team, a Virginia team, a Ohio team. There's not really Ohio State's taken care of, but I guess they could go clean up some of the smaller Ohio schools. Would you pull a Kansas State? I think those make a lot of sense. Or do you go try to convince the ACC powers that they're part of a dying system and they need to join up here? I think that's the route you might see happen. I think the SEC knows that they've got this part, the college football heartland, essentially on lockdown. Why break out of the mold? And you can pick up your Miamis, you can pick up your Georgia Techs, you can pick up your Clemsons, you can pick up your Florida States, throw your North Carolinas in there too. Southeastern Super Conference doesn't seem too far-fetched, does it? Congo says Notre Dame, all their rivals are now in the Big 12, the Big 10. See, it throws me off. I know you're putting the logo how it actually is set. Besides Stanford, that's a great point, Congo. What does Notre Dame do? Does Notre Dame continue to flaunt, we're our own thing, we don't want to be beholden to a conference? I mean, no one's really forcing their hand to yet. I mean, they've done so for basketball and things like that. But when it comes to football, they can kind of just do whatever they want, schedule whoever they want. I don't really know that this forces them into a situation where they have to make a choice, but it would make a lot more logical sense for them to go to the Big Ten. And I would argue, if we want to talk about the SEC and the Big Ten becoming these super conferences, right? If they pull Notre Dame along with UCLA and USC, and when you kind of Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan State, I'd throw them in there as well. Ohio State, Penn State, and everybody else that's part of that. Nebraska, if they never get their lives back together. Notre Dame makes that a bit of a sweeter deal for the Big Ten. But you got to change your name because it's throwing me off. ACC won't happen till 10 years. Are you talking about them either expanding or dissolving? Yeah, I don't want us to sit here and think when we talk about what this means for college football, but SEC and Auburn football, this isn't something that's going to start happening right away. But now the pawn has been moved, right? A lot of the times you set up moves early on in chess to set you up for further moves down the line. So it's almost like in the game of market share, in the game of TV audience, in the game of money, when it comes to college athletics, but specifically college football, it's like the SEC it's like the board had been reset after the last expansion. The SEC said, I'm going to move my pawn not just out a little bit, I'm going to slide it all the way. You can move 2 spaces that first time with the pawn. I'm going to move it all the way out here. I'm going to get Oklahoma and Texas. Big Ten says, all right, touche. UCLA and USC. And when you think about it beyond football too, that's a smart move basketball wise. I don't know what they look. UCLA was pretty good in baseball this year. So when you think about that, I would imagine USC's competitive in basketball. I would imagine they're competitive somewhat in baseball as well. So it's probably a holistically smart move to bring in the two of those. I'm kind of shocked that Oregon was not included in this deal, because then that would give you the two coast, or a Washington, and they're usually pretty respectable and all that in most of those sports. But I do think that the pawn now has been moved to match. Now who's going to make the next move? Is it going to be an ACC? Is it going to be a Big 12 trying to survive when it's not going to? Or is it going to be the SEC saying again, all right, we got to stay ahead of the game? If I might use, and this might turn a lot of the people off from this topic, but I frequent Orlando a lot. We go to Disney World a lot. There's two, there's Disney World, and then there's their rival Universal. If I use this analogy, you find that Disney World is always directly ahead or right in front of Universal, and Universal do these things to catch up, and then Disney will make sure that they do add a park, add this thing, just one more, just to always keep that buffer there. I think we're starting to move in that territory where the SEC potentially will have to start moving their pawn a little bit further out to make sure they counter for that. How long till Notre Dame joins a conference for a TV deal? They've still got their NBC deal, I believe. So as long as that still is in play, Notre Dame, to their credit, has found a way to make it work thus far. Will it continue? The longer this goes on, the crazier this gets. I don't know that it can. What do you think about the Big Ten conference TV deal now? In retrospect to this, with this, knowing this now, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty dang good. But yeah, I mean, we all saw this coming. Two super conferences building their way. So I know not everybody that's watching this is an Auburn fan, so you can answer if you're another Jenner fan. But as Auburn fans, a lot of my audience, let's assume that this news of UCLA and USC is, going to go all the way through. Nothing happens with it. Let's assume this prompts the SEC to make a decision to add someone else. And I've asked this on social media, and of course you get everybody being grumpy and be like, well, I don't want to add anybody. I don't care what you want. It's happening at some point, 50 years down the line, 5 years down the line. Who do you as an Auburn fan, who do you as a SEC fan, who do you as just a college football fan that may be watching want the SEC to add in response? Because when we talk about TV deals, when we talk about money, when we talk about marketing, all of that stuff, you want to go to markets you just like the Big Ten just did. That's essentially what they did. And we've talked a lot about, you guys have brought some great points up about already. So I would say when you look at the contiguous Southeastern Conference and the map it takes up, you can pretty much say that their hand is very evenly across all the Southeast, with the exception of that central, and really not even central, just that lower third of the Southeast of Florida. They've gotten to South Carolina. You count, North Carolina, not really, but they're close enough. They kind of get in there a little bit. Texas, they've got their arm into southeastern Texas and the eastern part of Texas with Texas A&M up to Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. They're gonna have Oklahoma and Texas now. They've got all that covered. So what do you add that brings value to the SEC, creating future potential opponents for Auburn and SEC opponents if you're an SEC fan watching? Miami and FSU, if today from 10 years, or Clemson. So I think when we talk about this topic, there's two different schools of thought, right? There is the money side, what we were just talking about, but then there's the thing that makes sense in terms of geography, that makes sense in terms of rivalries, in terms of interest. I think a lot of that you see with the FSUs, the Clemsons, even with the Miami. I think the Miami situation has potential there. Because it checks off the market box. The Miami market is wide open, that lower third of Florida. I think that is one of the more likely ones that you would see happen. I would think that personally, you would see them try to reach out to Kansas now, Kansas State or Kansas or both. I want to throw one out that I think a lot of people mistake because they don't think of them as a Big 12 team because they're so far out. West Virginia. If you want to talk about really encroaching on your enemies in terms of super conferences territory, the SEC needs to add West Virginia. Get you up as close as you can get into that northeastern market, the upper reaches of the southeast, if you want to call it that. That, to me, makes the most sense. And then Notre Dame would make good sense as well because it gets you up into the Midwest as about as close as you can get in Indiana. So really, that's what it kind of boils down to when it means for the SEC for Auburn. What makes the most sense financially? What makes the most sense in terms of TV dollars, markets? Miami is the easiest case, I think. I think West Virginia is an easy case. I think Kansas is an easy case. But if you want to talk about what gets people excited and what gets people super interested, that is going to be your FSUs, your Clemsons, your Georgia Techs, maybe even your North Carolinas. Throw them in there as well. Maybe a Duke, maybe bring North Carolina and Duke in simply for basketball alone. The thing that's going to keep the ACC afloat is if they can get some of this pie that's being grabbed up and they can keep the basketball together. That's the thing that may help the ACC survive. Kevlar, ACC has to officially add Notre Dame now or it gets left behind. I think as much as I think Notre Dame is still in a good position to do what it wants. I think they're going to get offered however that works. Pretty sweet deal. Imagine you get to be in a conference, but you keep your exclusive NBC deal. It's not a bad deal. ACC, I think for them to survive, they've got to secure who they have. They need to go get West Virginia. They need to go get Notre Dame. They need to secure probably some teams in the middle of the country. Your Kansases, your Kansas. And I think they could convince a Kansas and a Kansas State basketball at least to come out there. Maybe you go and get the Iowa State too. They're going to have to start doing what the Big Ten just did and go grab some teams that geographically don't make sense, or else the SEC or the Big Ten will. Yes, or the Big Ten will. God, it's still so weird talking about them that way. If we add, let's say 4 teams, we should add Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, Virginia. I will differ from you a little bit there because I actually am a big fan of us adding West Virginia. As you can tell, I've brought it up several times. I would say West Virginia. I would say Miami. And then I think if you get those two, because they give you 2 different markets and extend your contiguous reach, I think those alone would allow you to do something like bring in a Clemson and bring in a Florida State. And that makes you very, very powerful from that point. I knew what you meant, Thomas, with Virginia, not specifically UVA, but that's probably maybe a Virginia Tech in that instance. Still think Notre Dame will join the Big Ten now that USC and UCLA joined in the Big Conference. Do you think the Big Ten Conference Championship will play in the Rose Bowl? Oh, but imagine, because right now they just play. Where do they play? Where does the Big Ten play right now? Why am I blanking on this? Is it just where do they? Oh, is it Indianapolis? What if they rotated it? That'd be kind of cool. But then you run the risk of it just being an exclusive Midwest Big Ten championship, and then nobody's going to travel out there. I think they find somewhere in the middle of the country to do it. I don't know where, but Teddy is one of our frequenters here, one of our subscribers who has a persuasion for the Big Ten, is loving this. Yes, as we were talking about, Teddy, before you got here, the chess piece was moved by the SEC, and it has been matched by the Big Ten. The thing is, if we add more, we're turning college football into 2 major conferences. Is that really what we want to see? To me, that's creating NFL 2.0. I think there's 2 separate conversations. There's what you want and what's going to happen. And I'm not. I hope you don't feel like I'm coming at your opinion or your side or what you're saying there, but it's coming. There's nothing we, the fans, can do outside of stopping watching altogether as a collective to tell them, hey, we don't like the way this is going. The change is coming, so you might as well accept it. They're going to get bigger. They're going to be better. It's just now it's a question of, can a third super conference survive with the SEC and Big Ten? And then we'll see what happens from there. I hate to disagree with you, but if I created a college in my basement called Teddy U, that college would have just as much chance to get in the SEC as West Virginia. I'm not talking about, when I think about adding West Virginia, it's a holistic view in terms of athletics, and it is a market. I think you came in a little late into the stream, Teddy, so I explained a lot of that. West Virginia being added has more intrinsic value than just adding to Clemson. Yeah, you add Clemson, they bring another power in college football. What else? That's it. You got to look at it outside of that. Can't just be, as much as we acknowledge that football is king, Auburn football is king, as we talk about here. For us, there are other factors that play into this that make the deal sweeter. So let me kind of start bringing us to the point, but keep your comments and questions coming throughout the stream if you'd like to. This is happening, whether you like it or not. I didn't believe it when I saw it, but it's happening. There will be 2 super conferences at some point. Will there be a third? That remains to be seen. If the ACC can pull a West Virginia, can pull a Notre Dame, and some of the maybe some of the West Coast. I mean, why don't they just call it the coastal teams? Or because we're forgetting about Oregon and Oregon State and Washington State. You're forgetting about Stanford. So if they can do that and create the coastal conferences, both of the coast, that might work. But I see the SEC becoming more powerful, going to get a balance of maybe half teams that make sense market-wise, but also teams that make sense fan-wise, Clemson's, Georgia Tech's, and things like that. And what does that mean for Auburn football? It makes me excited in terms of an Auburn football fan, because if this opens a door for a Georgia Tech, for a Florida State, for a Clemson to come in, those are teams that we have at least some history with and would like to see them back. It gives me an opportunity as an Auburn SEC fan to see teams that we don't necessarily see all that much. If it were a Notre Dame, if it were a West Virginia, if it were a Kansas State, if it were a Miami, I would love that. And frankly, in terms of the variety, but I am also a traditionalist, and I lament with you, for those of you that don't like this happening, that we are losing what we know as college football. But remember, there were generations before us, and some of you were part of those generations that have said that before, and it's still here and we still love it. So that's all I can really say in summary of that. UNC, Virginia Tech, Kansas, Colorado. Are you making suggestions for the SEC? North Carolina, or just a Carolina school, makes some sense. Virginia Tech would make some sense. I'm strictly thinking of the West Virginia thing as getting up into the Northeast market as much as you can. That makes sense because West Virginia adds value in terms of basketball. At some point, they'll be at least decent again in football. They're not a pushover. I believe they're okay in baseball. So they bring holistic sports value, market share value, like a Miami does. Final question: who had the better deal, SEC or Big Ten, with the expansion now? Money, brand, TV marketing, etc. Who's got the better deal? I think it's still the SEC, simply because they're able to. We can talk about reach, right? Like you brought it up earlier, Congo. They have the Northeast market and the LA market now on their TV deals, essentially. That's great, but if you can't produce championships on the regular, the way the SEC has done, it's not going to matter too much. People are not going to get as excited about it. So I think this has brought, I think the Big Ten was behind the ball when it comes to the SEC. I think this has brought them at least even in conversation right now. But I think the better deal is still the SEC adding Texas. When you look at, you want to talk about a better deal, adding Texas and Oklahoma, go look at the championships those two teams would have brought to the SEC this year and tell me who got the better deal. It's easy. It's literally North versus South, but the South has the advantage. Well, because we're connected, contiguous, all that stuff. I keep using that word. If we want one up the Big Ten, we need to steal FSU, Miami, or Clemson away from the ACC. Those make a lot of sense history-wise, logistic-wise, market-wise. Outside of Miami, those don't make sense, but they stand a good chance of happening. When a super conference happens, who could leave the SEC? I don't know that anybody's going to leave the SEC. I know what you're thinking, Thomas. Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt. We need Vanderbilt to bring our GPA up for our athletes. Not that we have bad schools. It's just what they do for you. Teddy from Texas. Texas A&M, Arkansas, South Carolina, Missouri, Oklahoma versus Nebraska, Penn State, UCLA versus, I'm trying to get what you're saying there, Teddy. It's a little bit confusing. You've got matchups. And then, okay, that's a little bit confusing. SEC is still in a stronger position, unfortunately, because sadly the slogan, it just means more. It's very true. I hate it, but it's true. At least you can acknowledge that. I know you're a Big Ten guy, but I love that you can acknowledge that. But I love parity and I love competition. And I think while this has shortened the playing field for all involved, it's made the SEC have a true competitor in the Big Ten. Triple J, I low-key feel bad for the student athletes. The amount of traveling they'll have to do for in-conference games is about to get ridiculous, not to mention the travel costs for fans. Yes and no. The bigger these conferences get, the more, what's the word I'm looking for? Divisional pod they will get. This isn't just because they're being added. The bigger they get, you're going to start. What I think is going to happen, someone alluded to it earlier, is you're going to have two, maybe a third mega conferences at this point, and each have these subdivisions. And we're basically just going to be back to where we were in terms of you see these certain group of teams every year, but now because they're in your conference, you have the opportunity to go play Oklahoma. You have the opportunity to go play a Miami if they were added to the SEC. For the Big Ten, you have the opportunity to go play UCLA. You have the opportunity to go play USC. You have the opportunity as UCLA to go play Penn State. The bigger it gets, the more opportunity it becomes to get smaller. Yes, Corey, we agree. And thank you for checking in, sir. Good to see you. You were thinking Missouri and South Carolina could just go on and head out. Personal opinion, not based in fact. Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to put them out there. I don't know that anybody will be kicked out. That doesn't feel like something that the conferences do. You don't give up market share that you already have. South Carolina is our market, and we will. I mean, you could say you trade Clemson for that, sure, but Missouri, we're not giving that up. That's a stretch into the Midwest that we need. Missouri is ours and will stay ours. They've been in the playoffs every year. Are you talking about US? Are you talking about South Carolina? Or are you talking about Southern Cal? I got to be a little bit more specific on this. You're talking about South Carolina. If you're talking about the playoffs, they weren't in the playoffs for basketball. That's why they got rid of their head coach. They weren't in football. I don't know what you're really referring to there. So anyway, all right. Final comments, questions, derogatory rebuttals. Get them in now. Get them in fast. A couple reminders for you at the top of the chat window, and I'll put this in the description as well. We have the link to our E2C network survey. Please, 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 if you haven't done this, please do that. If you, again, a reminder, if you were here last night when we announced it, that had a problem, so you'll need to redo it for me if you did that last night. That survey takes about 5 minutes. It's a huge help helping direct our content, what you guys want to see. The YouTube channel now exists as it is, mainly because of response from this. So if you want to shape what we do here, that survey is your biggest starting point that you can do that with. So please do that. Check out links in the description for ways you can help support our content. And please do make sure you smash the like button because it does help us out. Subscribing and hitting that notification bell also helps. All right, let's see what you guys are still saying as we kind of rapid fire it out of here. You're saying the Pac-12 is easier than the Big Ten? I think, yeah, most ways they are currently. After this, definitely. Be interesting if and when the SEC responds to this. As I was saying, Bruce, I don't know how long you've been here. I don't think that this is going to force an immediate response, but has now brought them back close to being even again. Clemson, Georgia Tech, Louisville, FSU rumored to the SEC on Twitter, but that's, thank you, you said it. That's Twitter again. Don't believe anything Twitter says. It's very rarely true. SEC has the most lucrative TV deals in any conference. One would be ignorant to leave that. Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to leave. And I don't think anybody's going to be kicked out. I think we're just speculating on that. Who would you get rid of? What about Auburn adding Memphis to its basketball schedule? It's already looking like a tough slate in our non-conference schedule. Kevlar, great question, even though we're not going to cover that here. I'm doing a Everett podcast that'll be out in the morning about the SEC release, not the dates, but the SEC basketball schedule for Auburn. When the school officially announces that Memphis, which they haven't yet to my knowledge, we will do a video about that tomorrow. If the running back from Catholic High in Montgomery commits to Auburn, we'll have a video about that. So you guys have a lot of content coming out for us in the next 24 hours, but also, next couple days, probably. Would the Big Ten become the Big 12? The Big Ten would become whatever it wants to be. Probably switch back to the Legends and Leaders Conference, if that's what they want to call themselves. USC had better chance in the Pac-12, although I'm excited to see the new and improved Big Ten. Yeah, but that's not why you make those decisions. You make those decisions what gets you the most money as when you whatever conference you're going to be part of, right? Because why would Oklahoma and Texas come to the SEC? Why would you want to come compete against that? Because it's all about the money. Same situation here. Can't always be about wins and losses. All right. I think we've caught up with everything. Thank you guys so much. Take that survey, top of the chat, hit that link, 5 minutes. Huge helped us. If you do nothing else tonight, need to redo it. If you did it last night for me because it did not take. Thank you guys so much for being here on a late night impromptu live stream. This isn't even out on social media. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and spending some late night discussion time with me to talk about Auburn football or Auburn sports, SEC sports, and now college football, as well as we kind of expand a little bit sometimes what we do here on the network. Thank you for being here. Till we talk to you again.